Thanks for staying up later. Glenn Frey is with us tonight. His new, what do we call them these days? Discs, not albums. The natural thing is to say album.
Collection of songs.
Collection of tunes. That's good enough. Called Strange Weather is out now, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But I can't trust this to memory, even though I'd probably get most of them, because like you folks, I've listened to them over the years. But I'm going to go from the list of Eagles songs or songs that Glenn wrote on his own. Take It Easy, Take It to the Limit, Lion Eyes, One of These Nights, Desperado, Heartache Tonight, Life in the Fast Lane, New Kid in Town, I Can't Tell You Why, Hotel California, either on his own or in combination with others. He wrote all of those songs. If somebody said, time capsule, 3 or 4 of them, alone with the Eagles, in whatever combination, what 3 or 4 would you toss in there?
I'd probably put Take It Easy in, because it was the first Eagles song and really sort of was America's and everybody's first image of our band, you know, and I think it was the vistas of the Southwest, and, you know, it was the beginnings of what became country rock.
Mm-hmm. I
would put in Desperado, which is the first song Don Henley and I wrote together, and I think I was 24 and Don was 26, and to think that 20 years later, you know, this song would stand the test of time, would still be being recorded by people and performed by people, I would put that in there. One of These Nights, my personal favorite Eagles song, along with I Can't Tell You Why. I think I would put, you know, those are 2 of my personal favorites. From my own career, The One You Love, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and True Love, one of my favorites, my take on Al Green. But, you know, there's a lot of songs in my past, and, you know, songs are like your kids, you know, you raise them from, you know, the time they're little till they're big and grown up, and then you wave goodbye as they go out the door. And, you know, I have many favorites.
Now, missing from that list is Hotel
California, yeah.
Which a lot of people would say, just from the standpoint of sales and identity of the Eagles, that seems like it belongs on the list.
Yeah, I think you could put that in. That was probably our best record. As far as making a record is concerned, I think Hotel California, the album, and Hotel California, the song, were probably the zenith of the Eagles in that what we had to say came together with our learning of how to make records. And that song was co-written with Don Henley and also with Don Felder, an often not recognized but integral part of the Eagles in the second half of the band.
It's also a very sophisticated lyric. Now, a lot of songs have verse, chorus, maybe a second verse. Now let's repeat the whole thing, get the chorus and the hook in there, and we're done. I mean, this thing is a real narrative.
Well, Don and I talked about that song, and you know, we were and are big Steely Dan fans. We were always quite amazed that Steely Dan was so brave lyrically. They got the Steely Dan T-shirts. You know, they had lines in their songs that we would sort of looked at ourselves and says, whoa, would we have put that in one of our songs? We started talking about Hotel California and wanted to sort of write a song that was sort of like an episode of The Twilight Zone. All of our songs were cinematic, but we wanted to open up with it was just one shot to the next, and they didn't necessarily make sense. It was just picture of the guy on the highway, picture of the hotel, picture, you know, and the guy walks in, the door opens, strange people, and it's just sort of following this guy, and it doesn't really make sense. It's just sort of like I said, an episode out of The Twilight Zone or something. And so we decided to just sort of create something strange, just to see if we could do it.
Mirrors on the ceiling, pink champagne on ice, and she said, we're all just prisoners here of our own device. And in the master chambers, we gathered for the feast. They stab it with their stealing knives, but they just can't kill the beast.
And then, of course, a lot was made out of it, a lot was read into it, a lot more than probably there exists, but, you know, I think we achieved perfect ambiguity.
What was the line, they stab it with their stealing eyes, they just can't kill the beast? Was that a tip of the cap to Steely Dan?
As they had said in a song of theirs called Tell Me Everything You Did, they had a line where the guy was arguing with his girlfriend, and the line was, turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening. Walter Becker had a girlfriend at the time who was a big fan of the Eagles, and I think it used to grate on Walter that she used to play Eagles records at the house maybe, but That's how, so they sent a little message to us, and yeah, we give them a little tip of the tam.
If you achieve perfect ambiguity, what's the strangest interpretation of a line in that song that you've heard from anybody?
Well, I don't think it's not so much one line, but just that they just took that overall album and opened it up and took that picture of us with, you know, and I was watching on, you know, some religious channel, you know, the guy holding up the album saying, and this woman is a priest in the devil's church, and this over here, right here is, you know, that. And I was like, whoa, really? I didn't know that when we hired them.
With Hotel California, was it almost inevitable that at that point a certain kind of peak was reached? Maybe it wasn't your best album, but commercially it was the most successful album. And at that point it almost had to start tapering off because you'd positioned yourselves sort of as musicians / outlaws. Well, how much of an outlaw can you be if you're this universally successful, and not only is the kid who wants to drop out of school listening, but his teacher's listening?
There are only a few people in rock and roll who understand the experience of going in to make an album after you've sold over 10 million copies of the album you previously made. I guess starting out, you know, one dream would be to have a multi-platinum album. We never, of course, anticipated that we would go over 10 or 15 million. But it turns around and puts a tremendous amount of pressure on you to, you know, to live up to everything that was said and about that record and you know, the amount of sales. Somebody asked my friend Bob Seger why the Eagles break up, and he said, well, in 2 words, Hotel California. You know, and I think in some ways we did peak, you know, that was, you know, the best work that we did. That was where everything really came together, personnel, songwriting, the experience in the studio to learn how to make records and put them together. It was really an exciting time. It was an easy record to make. The whole album was done in 6 or 7 months. It was not a difficult record to make. We were on a roll. It's good to have hit records because even though you may feel that you haven't done your best work, you know you're on the right track. You know, and I think we were bristling with confidence at that time, and we weren't afraid to step out and take some chances, and we had a very, very prolific couple of guitar players in our band, two guys that were really good. You
think it was your best creatively, critically, as well as commercially?
I think, yeah, I think there's no doubt. Side one's pretty impressive, and then if you include The Last Resort and a couple of the other tunes on side two, it's a pretty good record.
How did you react to the occasional criticism, and anybody who's this successful and then ultimately mainstream is going to get it, which is, all right, these guys, good tunesmiths, they knew what they were doing, but it got a little bit too slick and a little bit too accessible to everybody, and therefore, by definition, it loses its edge?
Well, those are critics who lose their leverage when all of a sudden something gets mass acceptance. Then they're no longer arbiters of taste, and obviously anything that 15 million people like can't be all that good. But, you know, we just took that with a grain of salt. You know, we used to look at the, you know, I mean, I wish I could pull out, like, the reviews from Rolling Stone of Hotel California. I don't think they were glowing. And, you know, Henley and I just sort of looked at it and said, we must be selling a lot of records. Even they don't like us.
You mentioned it. We've got it. It's from February of 1977. It's the Rolling Stone review of Hotel California. This is the very definition of a mixed review. Hotel California, this is by Charlie Walters, showcases both the best and worst tendencies of Los Angeles-situated rock, but more strikingly, its lyrics present a convincing and unflattering portrait of the milieu itself. Don Henley, handling 5 of the 8 vocal tracks, expresses well the weary disgust of a victim or observer of the region's luxurious excess. And then it goes on to praise the musicianship and how catchy some of the songs are. But it seems to me almost predictable in that from a New York perspective, the easy label to attach to almost everything that was coming out of the West Coast was, this isn't about anything that's really relevant. This is about people self-absorbed and kind of just hanging around.
Well, we showed him, Bob. We shut that guy right up, and a bunch of others like him. Now, I really believe, you know, firmly that if you're getting bad reviews, you're doing something right.
But don't they hurt?
Well, we used to have a list, you know, which was sort of punch 'em on sight. There was a punch 'em on sight list, you know, and we were protective not only of our own music, but I think what really hurt was when we'd see people rail Jackson Browne. or J.D. Souther or Souther, Hillman, and Frey,
Yeah.
or, you know, people that we knew, you know, not just ourselves. But I think you have to, you know, you have to understand, you know, that these people sit at typewriters and, you know, in little funky corners of the world and sort of wish they were doing what we were doing. We didn't get a lot of good reviews. Got a lot of good reviews live. You know, our show was, you know, we used to get good reviews toward the end. But, you know, we were never the darlings of the critics. And that suits me just fine.
Where'd the name Eagles come from?
Well, the Eagles, the reason we chose that name, I think, was because it represented a lot of things. There was the Southwestern Native American approach, which was that the eagle embodied the highest aspirations of man. It was the creature that flew closest to the sun, was the only bird of prey that didn't prey on other birds. Every country had an eagle. It was on the dollar bill. It was the American symbol. Yet it also sounded like a car club, you know, a street gang, a football team. You know, it seemed to have a lot of, you know, it seemed to cover a lot of ground, and it was very American. So that, you know, we, after, you know, we threw out ideas like the Saltines. I'm trying to think of other names that didn't work before we came to the Eagles. The Small Fry Dance Band. You know.
These are lesser alternatives than Eagles, I think.
Fortunately, yeah, I think we picked the right name.
Down the 7 Bridges Road. Pretty close to good. Not too bad. I'm gonna give you, it's gonna be about 2 minutes, so come on, do what you gotta do.
And we're back with Glenn Frey. Let me throw out some names of people you work with or intersected with, and you give me the idea of what they contributed to your life or what your thought is about them, your first thought that pops into your mind. J.D. Souther.
First guy I met when I came to California. Liked him right away. J.D. and I met. He was going with my girlfriend's older sister. I originally went to California to follow a girl that I met in Detroit who moved out to California to get in the music business. And when I met out there, I met J.D. the first day. And J.D. and I immediately hooked up. We laughed like crazy. And J.D. had a lot of opinions. Hadn't met so many people that had opinions about things, but J.D. had a lot of opinions about music and who was good and who wasn't. And J.D. was a big influence as well. Spent 3 years in a now defunct acoustic duo called Long Branch Pennywhistle. Probably a poor choice of group name, you know, compared to like the Eagles or something.
Yeah.
But he was the first guy I met from Texas, too. I was to meet a series of people from Texas.
Like who?
Henley.
Right.
My road manager, Tom Nixon, who's been my best friend for 20 years. A whole lot of people we met from Texas.
All right, since you mentioned Henley, we've talked about him before, what's the first thing that comes to mind if I say his name?
Great artist. Dedicated artist. You know, some people, Don sort of has sometimes a Sistine, I'm painting the Sistine Chapel approach to his work. He's very exacting, wants everything to be right. Great singer, underrated drummer, important artist and activist now. Good friend in the 70s. Still a good friend, although we haven't talked to each other much. But I think he's an important artist and somebody that brings a lot of credibility, you know, to the music business and to songwriting.
Jackson Browne.
Another big influence on me. Prolific songwriter. Jackson, J.D. Souther, and I once lived in a 2-story apartment in Echo Park. The sum total of our 3 rents was $90. J.D. and I paid $60 for the place that had a living room, and Jackson paid $30 for the place underneath. And every night and every morning, Jackson was practicing songs and his playing and writing of songs. And I heard him crafting his songs for his first album, you know, and I was just very, very impressed with him, you know. So few people at age 23 could singularly be that prolific. You know, most of us at that age needed to be in bands. where you disguise your weaknesses, play on your strengths, and have a group of, a group of guys, to sort of band together till you'll learn what you're doing. I often thought being in a band was like getting out of college and joining a practice. You wouldn't just set up your own law firm. You'd join you'd work with other guys, and then maybe after 10 years, then you'd go out and start your own business. But Jackson was like the first prolific songwriter that I met.
Linda Ronstadt.
The first lady of country rock. She probably more than any one person is responsible for the Eagles getting together. Don Henley and I got hired by her in May of 1971 to go on a very brief tour of the Southeast. Him as her drummer, me as her rhythm guitar player. And we got out there on the road, and Linda and her manager at the time, John Boylan, had this idea that they wanted to put together a super country rock group to back up Linda. And they definitely wanted me and Henley in the band, and then they started talking about members of the Burrito Brothers, Poco, things like that. And Don and I went to Linda and said, Linda, we want to have our own band. And I think where other people would have maybe been miffed by that, Linda completely understood and said, oh, I think that's great. And then she helped us get Bernie Ledden to come visit and sit in at Disneyland. She helped us get Randy Meisner to come up to a show in Los Altos at a little club and sit in with us. And then Henley and I were able to pitch both of them about our idea of starting another band. So Linda really, really helped put the Eagles together. Also, I would say that Linda's always felt a responsibility, I think, to educate as well as entertain. She's always put in a Chuck Berry song for people that might not have heard of that, or Blue Bayou by Roy Orbison, or spotlight songwriter Carla Bonoff and do two of her songs.
She goes up and does the Nelson Riddle stuff.
Sure, she did the Nelson Riddle stuff. She helped Warren Zevon by doing some of his tunes. She's done her Mexican music, which is beautiful. She did Pirates of Penzance. She's done. I really admire her bravery and her credibility. She has a lot of. I'm groping for the word here. She's got good credentials, and I think she's got a lot of courage as an artist. She does the music she wants to do. I think it would have been so easy for her after Heart Like a Wheel to have just sort of continued to crank out that style of music, but she's always been an explorer.
That there is a line or two in there that doesn't have to mean any specific thing, but that it's evocative enough that the way the words come together in combination with the music is evocative enough that somebody can attach their own meaning to it, and it's just as good, maybe, as what you intended.
I think that there's, I started writing songs before there were videos. So the first thing that Don and I started concentrating on was imagery, and that, we try to make our songs open like movies. And if you look back over those songs, whether it's on a dark desert highway or I'm running down the road, a lot of openings of our songs, you sort of get a picture. But then from there, I think it's important, to allow people to interpret their own way. And when we were writing songs like Lion Eyes, which was really a song about us as struggling musicians looking at some very high-class, unattainable girls who were already affixed to important and wealthy people in Los Angeles, and so we decided to write this song about this little triangle. We looked at ourselves and said, is this too inside? But in fact, if you write about what happens to you well enough, I think everybody else identifies with it and interprets it their own way, to where people would come up and say, oh, I had the same thing happen, man, I was in love with this rich girl and she didn't want to have anything to do with me, or whatever. I think it's important to allow people to let their own imagination become involved with your work.
Yeah, you mentioned that you started writing songs before videos. I've asked other musicians about this. Do you think videos, generally speaking, have been a liberating thing in that it's another avenue? Or, all things considered, are they inhibiting because they impose an image on the viewer and listener rather than allowing them to make up their own?
I think it's the same sort of challenge as writing. I think it's just another challenge. I think 10 to 15% of the people that do it do well, and the rest of them don't. I've seen some very good videos. I've also seen a lot of really bad videos. I think it's a marketing tool. It's a way to get yourself circulated around the world without touring. You know, and I have fun doing videos myself. I don't struggle with it at all. I really enjoy, to me, it's just an extension of the cinematic mind, and I'm able to do fun things in my videos.
Out of the blue, out of the night, you came along and you changed my life. I'm feeling things I swear I never felt before. Yes, I am, baby. You looked at me, that's all it took. You read my heart like an open book, and it was true love. Right from the start, it's true love, straight from my heart.
We're going to stop right here because the network says we have to. But Glenn Frey is back with us tomorrow night to complete the conversation. Hope you'll join us, too. See you later.
Take it to the limit one more time.
Thanks for staying up later. This is part 2 with Glenn Frey. Talked about a lot of Eagles stuff the first time around. What do you hope people get? What sort of notion or impression do you hope they come away with from your new album, Strange Weather?
First of all, that Glenn's been working hard on a record for a couple of years, and it shows. And secondly, maybe that, you know, what's on my mind is the same thing that's on their minds. I'm thinking about the same things they're thinking about. Global warming, alienation, this world we're living in, and how we got to wake up and change a few things before it's too late.
But I've heard the record, and those themes are presented, but not in some ponderous, I'm going to belch you over the head with this way. The tunes are still listenable, still entertaining.
I like the phrase affable cynicism. I think that sort of is what I was going for.
There was always a point of view, at least I thought, a point of view in the Eagles records, but they weren't overtly political. Did you ever try to be? Did you think that was a missing ingredient? Were you sensitive to the occasional criticism that they weren't political?
Well, you know, I think our obligation in the music business, first and foremost, is to entertain. And then I think education and being topical is something that you address, and I think you have to be very good at what you do to take on those subjects. I think we became more opinionated, you know, as the band evolved. And I think Henley got braver lyrically, I got braver lyrically. You know, the things we decided to talk about, you know, as we were maturing and going through our 20s, I think we got braver with each record and did things more topical toward the end of the band. But, you know, it's not just enough to be topical. You know, I mean, if, how do I say this? Just because it's the way you feel doesn't mean it's a great song. Just because you have a social conscience doesn't mean that you've written a good song to address it, you know, to address the issues. And I think sometimes people need to be tricked into enlightenment, not just have it lay all out, you know, laid all out there like, here's a song I wrote after I watched CNN and I'm going to play it on the piano, nobody talk. You know, you know, I think people would rather have some, you know, groove to listen to and some seductive intro to get them in, and then hear a good singer start telling some story, and maybe they get educated subliminally. But I think the Eagles were plenty topical.
Topical, yes. Political, usually no, right?
No, I don't think we were political.
Now, there is some political material, some of it subtle and some of it more direct, on Strange Weather.
Yes.
So it's obvious that you've been doing some thinking about some things, and you want to get your attitude and point of view across to people.
Yeah, this is something that's just sort of happened naturally, you know. I mean, I never sit down before I'm doing a record and try to figure out what people want or, you know, figure out what's selling. You know, I mean, I've always just sort of followed my instincts and done songs that I, you know, they came out of me and I record them. But for some reason, the last 2 years, I've decided to say, you know, to make a few statements, or, you know, to maybe play out some love songs under the background of urban blight or under the background of global warming. It's not the issue of the song, but it's more like part of the fabric.
A song off this record like Love in the 21st Century talks about people's alienation and their inability to get into a truthful romantic or emotional situation?
Well, you know, I think that loneliness is an industry in this country. You know, we're so alienated and so diffracted now that it's hard for people to find people that they can connect with. And, you know, as well, in the 21st century, we follow this guy as he sort of goes through his search for the perfect girl, or the right girl for him. And he starts out with, like, driving in front of a nightclub and says, this is where to go. Look at all of these gorgeous girls. And, of course, you go in there and the guy kind of runs into a very, you know, these girls are, like, ambivalent, like the girls in the Robert Palmer video. You know, like, he's dancing with the girl, but she, like, you know, she's not even looking at him at all, you know. And it's like, no, this isn't where it is. And then they get into video dating. The other thing is we want to cut the deal in front, I've noticed. You know, being in Hollywood for 20 years, you know, I've met a lot of people, male and female, who want to do the deal in front. They want to know all about you, your philosophy, you know, how much money you make, where you're going, where you're from, da-da-da-da-da.
Well, viewing these supposed emotional connections as a commodity that you could price and evaluate like you would a car or whatever.
Well, see, I think that takes the guesswork and the discovery out of it. I mean, I couldn't sit there myself and look through a bunch of videos until, you know, I found somebody that seemed like they were right for me. But people are desperate.
It's interesting when you think about a song like that, and then think about some of the songs you wrote with the Eagles, which were romantic, and in some cases took shots at cynicism when it came to romance. It's interesting that you yourself say, when you first started to play rock and roll, there was nothing spiritual about it. It's a way to get out of the house and maybe meet some girls.
Did I say that?
I think so.
I wouldn't, that sounds like something I would have said. Well, it's true, you know, but I think everybody, you know, longs for love and longs for somebody special in their life. And, you know, I think everybody's looking for that. And everybody chooses to look in different areas in different ways. And there's no doubt that rock and roll is a great way to meet girls.
Was playing backup for Seeger the first big break of any kind?
He probably is the most important individual in my musical career, in that when I was 19 and Bob was 21, Bob took me under his wing. We used to play a circuit of clubs in Detroit called the Hideouts. And Bob was managed by Punch, and Punch ran the Hideouts. And my band finally got good enough that we auditioned one night and got a job at the Hideouts. And I met Seeger, and Seeger sort of took me under his wing, and he let me come to recording sessions. He took me to the Ramblin' Gamblin' Man recording session and let me play acoustic guitar and sing background on that record in 1969 or 68. We used to drive around Michigan in the car on Woodward Avenue, you know, and I remember one time a Cowsills song came on, and I said, turn that crap off, you know, and he says, no, wait, Glenn. They're on the radio, and we're not. Let's listen to how they got there. Bob was also the first person to really encourage me to start writing my own songs. We had a bunch of copy bands in Detroit that were very good, but Seeger said the only way you're going to get anywhere is if you write your own material, and you can do it. And so he really encouraged me a lot. And then I was more than happy. Then, you know, I went to California. The Eagles started out very well, and then we did very good. We did very well.
You think the audience is still there? I mean, record sales for some artists indicate that it is, but are you concerned that it will continue to be there for songwriters of your generation? Because the musical landscape has changed so much, and even the formats of radio stations have changed so much, and at least what your original audience is perhaps doesn't feel as alienated as it once did. They may fondly remember the old songs, but not have as much of a hunger for similar songs today. You worry about that?
No, I don't think you can worry about things you can't control. I think you just, you know, first of all, I never thought that, you know, at 42 I'd still be in the music business. I didn't even think at age 32 I'd be in the music business. But we have now come into the age of adult rock stars. And, you know, I'm quite surprised. We're sort of like the Sinatras of our generation. When I was in my 20s and my parents were in their 40s, they liked Sinatra and Tony Bennett and stuff. And I went, whoa. You know, I didn't really get it then. You know, but I think if you know, now, I believe so much in the popular song, Bob, you know, that I think if you write a great song, it'll stick around for a long time, and people younger will discover it.
Yeah.
People older will discover it. And you know, I think that's very, music isn't too musical right now. So I think when a Don Henley or a Glenn Frey or Paul Simon or James Taylor, and I don't mean to put myself in that, with that class of artist, I just mean to say when someone who is lyrical and melodic and knows, and, you know, and is not packaged, someone who is a real musician who can sing and play, when we make records, I think there's a format and a place for them, because there aren't that many records like that being made now.
Time is coming to do some soul searching. No more running, no more bridges burning. The time is coming for you and me to take a look inside. No matter what we see, let's do some soul searching. Just you and me. Our lives are changing. This whole world keeps turning. Can I sit here and wonder, baby, what we're really learning? Do some soul searching.
You had some solo hits in the early 80s with accompanying videos, songs like Smuggler's Blues, You Belong in the City, The Heat Is On is another one. Give me your thoughts about those tunes.
Well, Smuggler's Blues is probably, up until Strange Weather, really the only topical song that I had from my first 3 solo albums. But this was, you know, this was a subject that, you know, was coming up a lot, and living in Aspen and traveling around. Needless to say, I met my share of people that were involved in that sort of stuff, and it just seemed right to write a song about it. But it had to be written in such a way that it wasn't glorifying it, but rather just reporting on, you know, what was happening.
There's trouble on the street tonight, I can feel it in my bones. I had a premonition that he should not go alone. I knew the gun was loaded, but I didn't think he'd kill. Everything exploded and the blood began to spill. So baby, here's your ticket, put the suitcase in your hand. Here's a little money now, do it just the way we planned. You be cool for 20 hours and I'll pay you 20 grand. I'm sorry it went down like this, someone had to lose. It's the nature of the business, it's the smuggler's blues.
The Heat Is On is a funny story, because I went to the screening of The Heat Is On with Temporary Music, and Irving Azoff, who was president of MCA Records at the time, said, you got to come, you know, you got to get a song on this movie. It's going to be really big. So I went to the screening, and at the screening is Quincy Jones, Richard Perry, the Pointer Sisters, Stevie Wonder, and it's an Eddie Murphy movie. And I, you know, went to the screening, enjoyed the film, but I mean, I walked away and said, Irving, they don't have any use for the king of country rock, and you know, in this film at all. And so I really left the screening thinking that I wouldn't be doing anything for the movie. Lo and behold, 4 weeks later, my manager sends me a tape, and it's the 4C Faltermeyer demo of this song, The Heat Is On, and they want me to do it for Beverly Hills Cop.
So you didn't write The Heat Is On?
No. And so they sent me the tape over. I said, okay, I'll listen to it. And, you know, it sort of sounded like something me or Huey Lewis would do. You know,
sure.
It's kind of bouncy, saxophone, up-tempo rock tune. It was just before Christmas. They were offering me a little money. I did not have my second solo album ready to come out yet. I thought it might be a good idea to keep my name, you know, around or something like that. So, you know, for a little bit of money, I went in, I sang it one day, I played guitar the next day, and I just kind of walked away from it and thought, well, that was nice.
And the heat is on. Heat is on.
weeks later, it was a #1 record. And I never, as I say, never even thought that I would get a song in the soundtrack.
What are your thoughts on the occasional acting bits you've done?
I really enjoy doing that. I think that variety is very important in one's life, and if you just do music, your life can get a little bit boring. So I've really enjoyed the acting jobs that I had. I had a great time on Miami Vice. I got a lot of help in that episode from Paul Glaser, the director, and Don Johnson. And then my biggest thrill was working on Wiseguy for 7 episodes, where I actually had a character who had a lot of dialogue, somebody that we could follow from episode to episode, and I really started to get comfortable. And I guess, just like music, acting is all about being comfortable. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, and I think the more comfortable you get, then the more natural you are on camera. You know how to break a new act? You know how to take 4 kids from Cleveland, get them a producer, pick out the material, put them in the studio, record them, merchandise them, promote them. Are you a creative entity? Former Senior Vice President, Talent and Acquisitions, True Heart Records. Former Head of Promotion, Sunburst Records. Head of National Promotion, Landale. I have worked for everybody.
Sounds like you just can't hold a job.
It's because people without talent are afraid of people who have it. I really felt like around Wiseguy I was starting to get it a little bit. So I would like to do that again.
What's your take on allowing your music to be used in commercials? Bob Seger, who's a friend of yours, allowed Like a Rock to be used in a Chevy commercial. I asked him about it. He said that he'd been offered a lot more money for other commercial enterprises. He went with this one because he's from Detroit. He thought it would help the auto industry and therefore, by extension, a lot of working class people. That was his answer. Another guy whom you obviously admire is Neil Young. Not only doesn't do these things, but mocked it directly. Ain't singing for Pepsi, ain't singing for Coke. Where do you come down in this deal?
Well, I think I don't think it's us against them anymore, and I'm not so sure if you're making millions of dollars as a rock and roll star that you can protect your outlaw image by not doing commercials. I think it's totally up to the individual what they want to do. For me, I had no problem with it. I think it's just I think it's obviously you must have written a very good song for people to want to come and buy it. And in the instances that I, did commercials, I didn't have any problems with it. I mean, rock and roll, people who go to rock and roll shows drink beer. They want me to do an old-style beer commercial.
Right from the heart of the heartland.
In the heartland, people know what it means to reach for a dream. That's where old style is brewed.
I didn't see anything wrong with that. People drink soda pop. I don't consider Pepsi to be the enemy, and maybe you'd even look at it the other way, we're taking their money.
I was watching the Winter Olympics, the late-night show one night, and Pat O'Brien was on, and he had you hooked up. I think your wife, Cindy, was there as well, from Aspen. And what was interesting, you played a song, but also what was interesting was we got to see some of the kids that you work with, whom you bring in, I guess, from around the country to give them an experience that they otherwise would have no access to. You want to talk about that a little bit?
A year ago, my wife and I became involved with this group called an Aspen Grassroots Experience. And we have been bringing disadvantaged young people from America's inner cities and Native American Indian reservations to Aspen for a week of very challenging outdoor activities, which is accompanied with counseling and confidence building. And also we just give them a lot of love. And it was just, I've been doing charity work for 20 years. Anti-nuclear, political stuff, had many different, attempts to give something back. And I've always sort of been looking for something that made sense for me. And I really enjoyed the feedback. The kids that we bring are between the ages of 8 and 15. And we try to get them before they have dropped out of school, before they're involved in drugs or gang activity, and try to, in some way, give them a glimpse of what the possibilities that life holds. Everybody has turning points in their life. You know, if I hadn't gone to see, if my aunt hadn't taken me to see the Beatles, I may have never decided to be in a rock and roll band. So for these kids, it gives them an opportunity to see that there is life outside of, you know, the ghetto or off the reservation, that there are possibilities if you apply yourself, that although, you know, life is rough, you know, they're not excluded, you know, just because of the situation that they're in now. And we've gotten a great deal of satisfaction working with these kids. I'm back here this week because we like to have a follow-up program. We come back and visit with these kids. So we realize it's not like 1 week in the mountains and then you just send them back to where they come from. And a couple weeks after that, you know, the dream dies. We stay in touch with these kids. We send them birthday cards. We write them letters. We make phone calls. And a couple times a year, we come to New York, go to Denver, and go to Santa Fe and meet with these kids, see how they're doing. And all of these kids, almost to the man, are doing better in school. Parents come to these follow-up meetings and say, thank you, our daughter is talking to us now. Or they're getting along better with their brothers and sisters. You know, there are no bad kids. And the thrust of my charity work over the last 20 years has involved kids, because I think they're victims. And it's something I'm happy to do. I really enjoy being with the kids, too. I think it keeps me young.
So, you told me you hadn't done an interview of any length in 3 years, so we sent you out of the box with 2 back-to-back. Now you don't have to do another one for about 33 years.
That would be nice.
Which indicates how much you enjoyed this, I'm guessing.
No, I really enjoyed coming on your show, and I was, when I saw Seeger on the show, is really what turned the corner for me and made me want to come on the show. I had no idea that you were such an audiophile, and that you were so into things like songwriting and sort of the magical world of creativity that surrounds it. So it's been a pleasure to talk with you. And we'll come back. We'll do a sports segment next year. So.
Yeah, you know, I caught a clip of you in the booth with Vin Scully at a Dodger fantasy camp. We'll talk about that the next time.
All right.
We're out of here. Glenn Frey, folks. See you later.